I was being lectured by a communist. It was Friday afternoon in Korolev, which is a Moscow suburb. I was in a small conference room at RSC Energia, which is one of the main contractors for the Russian Space Agency. The year was 1995. My colleagues, as well as our Russian counterparts, were one conference room over, setting up for our protocol signing and celebration. And they were waiting for me to conclude my negotiation. I was 28 years old. Now, this is a common Russian tactic. You throw in a last-minute problem, or you hold off some negotiation with some stalling tactic until the near end when your American colleagues are tired and they want to go home and they're feeling schedule pressure and they only have a certain amount of time and you're trying to get a concession. Perhaps the Russians are wrong in this case or whatever. This was their little way of trying to put some screws. So what we were talking about was a PDR, preliminary data review package, for a pure oxygen pump that we were procuring within the $400 million contract that NASA had with the Russian Space Agency, now called Roscosmos. So NASA started this contract with the Russian Space Agency to get them into the International Space Station program, among other things. I've got quite a few stories about that contract, and I worked on that contracting team. I was I was not the contracting officer's technical representative. I was a technical support to inside the contracting team. The COTR is a very official role inside the government. I was not that official role. I was really the technical focus for about a third of the contract. And so we were talking about this pure oxygen pump. Now, this oxygen pump was going to work inside the airlock of the ISS, and it was going to pump pure oxygen in there because when the astronauts and cosmonauts are putting on their space suits, they need to be in pure oxygen at low pressure so that the nitrogen evolves out of their body and they don't get the bends when they go outside. So this is an important piece. Being pure oxygen, very safety critical. Oxygen wants to cause everything to light on fire and explode. It's in its pure form is unbelievably difficult to deal with. And so there's good reason for NASA safety to care about this. Now, the problem was they didn't want to give us what we were asking for, which was this PDR pack, this preliminary data review data package. Now, the contract, although vague, did say something along the lines of RSA shall deliver to NASA all detailed design documentation for the oxygen pump and its components, something like that. So vague, but it did say all, and you're going to give us all the documentation. Now, part of this was a bit of a differentiation between how we do design and how they did design, and what all documents mean to us and what all documents mean to them. That was part of the difficulty of working through our initial relationship. But there was a little bit more to it than that. I'm going to get into it. Now, in this particular case, the NASA safety guys wanted to know about the heat treatment of the main rotor bearing. My God. So, okay, so you got a motor inside there and a pump and all that, and the bearing inside that pump, how did you heat treat it? Sounds like a ridiculous question, like, my God, they can design a bearing. Well, once again, in a pure oxygen environment, there are certain heat treatments that over time don't work very well. And our safety guys wanted to know which one that they had. Now, at the same time, we did have a protocol in place that said that we were going to respect their safety and they were going to respect our safety, but working through these details was always somewhat difficult. Anyway, so they were refusing to provide this level of documentation. Now, sitting across from me was I do not recall this guy's name. I wish I did. But anyway, he was at least 60 years old. Hard to tell, especially in those days, because I tell you, the Russians didn't look good. At the end of the Soviet era, anybody over 50 looked like they were on death's door. Some mixture of communism, alcoholism, and smoking. They all looked pretty rough, and he sure did. Yellowing eyes and the whole 9 yards. He had had a rough life. But he was a very smart guy at the same time. Most of them were. He was also an old school guy, and you could kind of feel this is a guy that missed the Soviet Empire and was still a little bit pissed off that he was working with us. Some of the Russians I worked with were like me, really excited. Hey, we've been facing off against one another for the longest time. Now we're not, and we can learn how to be friends. This is a really great opportunity. And that was the majority of the people I dealt with, especially later on. Early on in the 90s, man, it was still kind of raw. You also have to remember that in the 90s, the Russian economy was just in collapse. I mean, that's how the Russian Empire failed. The Soviet Empire failed. It was economic collapse. This is how communist regimes always fail, because they always collapse, because communism is idiotic. But that's another story. So these guys may not have been paid. The guy I'm sitting across from, he may not have had a paycheck in a month or two, because the government was out of money, and his paycheck might not have been worth that much because they were on the edge of hyperinflation. As a matter of fact, I want to say it was 97 that they devalued the ruble 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1, something like that. I remember going out to dinner with 4 or 5 people and spending 1,000,000 rubles on dinner. It's pretty crazy. So that's what you're dealing with. You're talking. Anyway, and on top of that, so he's a senior guy. I'm a 28-year-old, and it's my decision whether he gets paid or not. Now, this kind of grates on him, more so than in America. Somebody young in America could be a big shot. In that culture, no, especially not at that time. So it was aggravating that he would have to actually deal with me instead of just tell me what to do. So all that stuff was playing in the background. Anyway, point is, he told me, and I believed him, that he didn't have the information, nor did he want the information. You see, Energia didn't build all the parts to this. This was a subcontractor, or a subcontractor to a contractor underneath Energia, which is not strange. The same thing happened in America. You buy a big assembly from Boeing, for instance, or Lockheed or Raytheon or whoever, and there's going to be bits and pieces from various subcontractors below them. They don't make everything from raw material. They don't have a smelter, where'd the chip come from? Well, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Anyway, so he didn't want to know exactly how it was built. And you have to understand, part of this was because of a post-Soviet habit. Your information was kind of your ticket to mattering, to being important, and your control of your information controlled your political standing in your organization. And if your information, didn't work out for you very well, that also could be really dangerous in that universe. So there was a lot of this oddity. So much was just not written down. It was in people's heads. These guys had great memories, despite the drinking. And so that was part of it. But part of it was also his point, which was, don't give me detailed design requirements, give me test requirements. I'll make them more strenuous and put them onto my subcontractor, and they'll make them more strenuous, and give me any requirement you want. He was really open about this. Make them really hard. Make me prove it, and I will make my contractor prove it. Because if I am there with my contractor and saying, yeah, I agree with that heat treating process, now I am accountable. This is him speaking. I'm accountable for that, and he's not. Now, part of that was this kind of like post-Soviet thing going on, but it was also actually kind of right. And the difficulty that I had was I actually agreed with him. I thought we were being ridiculous. I thought his approach was the right approach. I thought the NASA way diluted our accountability. And I had seen how it would breed our underlings to, put a proposal forward to their management that was sort of like a college student giving a draft presentation to a professor looking for a grade, and if it was good enough, great. If the professor approved. If the professor didn't approve, okay, I'll work harder. As opposed to really taking it seriously. Now look, I do not want to make it seem like people were slipshod or didn't care at NASA. That's not true. But what is true is this feeling that the approval's got to happen above me, and that somehow dilutes you a little bit. When you feel like you're the last thing, if I say yes, that this is the right thing, then it's going and somebody's going to live or die, it's a little bit more than if you have the backstop of approval above you. And that was kind of what he was getting at. And I agreed with that fact. Thing was, that wasn't my job. My job was to say no and get him to give me the information. We didn't fully resolve it at that time. I got him to agree to give me more information because I said, I am simply not going to pay this deliverable. And it was, several $100,000. I think the pump was $5 million in general, but the data packages probably added up to $1 million of that. And I wasn't going to pay. Simple as that. which of course pissed him off because I'm telling him, no, you can't do that. And, I'm the junior guy. But that's the way it worked. And you had to be tough. That was another thing. Russians will push you really hard. And if you're not tough, if you're just talking about, let's work together and I'm excited to work with you and this is going to be great and win-win and all that stuff, what you just told them is, hi, I'm a weakling. Run right over me. So you really had to be in there and get down and fight. And when you did, you'd make a friend out. In this case, not. But in a lot of cases, you'd make friends because then they'd actually respect you. That's really how that culture works. You've got to be really tough to earn the respect because, look, Americans don't know what hardship really is, and Russians do. And they've never had a government that wasn't horrible. And they know about hardship, and they can take a lot. So they only respect people that can take it. And that's part of that. Getting back to this, though, I saw the NASA point of view in my time later on. I'd see good reason to go through design details as well as the tests. You see, you bring additional experience. So when you bring someone in who's had a lot of experience into a design detail, they may remember something that this new design or the team that designed this thing didn't know, hadn't had that particular experience with this particular material, this particular process. And that's because space does weird stuff to you. There's so many times when I would see something like, this is a dumb thing, why are we doing this? And then if you dig hard enough, you'll find that there's some counterintuitive spaceflight oddity that caused what seemed like the right idea to not actually work. So there is something behind that. I'll tell a story also about SpaceX. They really started out kind of the way I wanted, what I was saying. Hey, look, don't give me all your dumb NASA processes. Don't give me any of that stuff. We're going to be faster, better, cheaper. We're doing this the way we build software and all that kind of stuff. And we have a firm fixed price commercial contract and you can't make us. And all that stuff was true. And they used that as a shield. Very arrogant and all that kind of thing. They ran into a lot of trouble. They had schedule slips, they had cost overruns and things, and they got their own difficult experiences. But the thing that was important about it is they did learn from our experiences and their experiences. So they would have experiences, take a look at our processes and go, okay, I'll use this piece, and this piece. And they built their own processes. And they're a very great company as a result of this. And that's really the kind of thing that you have to do. You have to kind of go through the zero-base review and kind of throw everything out for a minute and try to live without it and then put back in the stuff that you need. Because otherwise just trimming, it really doesn't work. There's a really great legacy at NASA and a lot of really great people. And most of the processes you really can't argue with, but somehow they are too big. And there needs to be a process to make them better. And here's hoping that Jared Isaacman can push NASA to do all those things. And that's the briefing. Please like, subscribe, please comment. Tell me if you think I'm a total idiot. That would be kind of fun to hear. Or tell me what your experiences were. If you were in the space industry, if you have other industries where you've had experiences where you've cut processes and caused problems and then made better processes. I'd like to hear if these space ideas actually work in other industries. Thank you very much.